Good evening, everyone. So my name is Dimitri Reyes. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director here at CavanKerry Press. This is our 35th reading in an ongoing virtual reading series for our book launches and other special readings with all of our authors. I'm so happy for all of you, 100 and almost 50 of you, to be joining us this evening for the launch of Jack Ridl's newest book, All at Once. And all of you were coming in all at once, so it's very apropos that that's the title of the book. Uh, we'll also be joined in by Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. Give me a second, because I had a scribble here. You know what's so funny with these names? And I'll give a quick story. I do these names so well when I ask, and then people give me like word tricks, and then I scribble the word trick. And then when I try to say it, I can't say it right. So Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. Did I say that right?
Really close.
Trommer.
Wahtola Trommer.
Wahtola Trommer. Thank you. Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, as well as James Cruz, are with us this evening. And we're also celebrating the launches of their books also. So it's a triple launch on this evening of our 35th reading that we have. Before we begin, I'm going to let us all know what the run of show is for this evening. Everyone is going to, well, both of our other readers are going to read for 15 minutes. Afterwards, we are going to have Jack read for about 20 minutes, and then there will be a Q&A where all of you can also ask questions. Now, I'm going to want you to put those questions in the chat box. That's why I already told you to start using the chat box in order to tell us where you're from so you're already familiar. I will do my best in moderating that Q&A to make sure that your voice is heard. Now, before we begin, I am going to bring on Tamara Alcresi-Coleman so she can give our land acknowledgement as well as other statements for this month.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tamara Alcresi-Coleman, and I'm the social media coordinator for CavanKerry Press. I'm going to give a quick visual description. We are adding these into our recordings as part of being more accessible. So I am a pale-skinned Middle Eastern woman with brown eyes and black curly hair. I'm wearing a Gaza sweatshirt and a kufiya. And it's my to welcome you to the latest in CavanKerry series, our virtual reading celebrating our new and forthcoming releases. Before the reading begins, we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that the land we occupy in Bergen County, New Jersey belongs to the Munsee Lenape people. We honor their history. We cannot function in our work as arts activists, nor offer a safe space for all writers without understanding the struggle for Indigenous rights. We will be adding to the chat a map of native lands for you to identify which land you occupy, and also links to a few resources for you to learn more and or offer your support. We would also like to acknowledge that it is Hispanic Heritage Month, a time to celebrate and recognize the vibrant tapestry of cultures, languages, and histories that shape the Hispanic and Latinx communities. Poetry has always been a powerful medium for storytelling, and during this month, we celebrate the voices of poets and writers who weave their own stories. We encourage you to read stories by Hispanic and Latinx authors, not just this month, but every month. And please bear with me, we have one last statement. In the last year, we have lost countless artists, writers, journalists, doctors, civilians, and children to war. This violence is unprecedented and inhumane. To watch our fellow humans suffer is an unacceptable price for existence. To the people who will never get to experience the joy, community, and art any longer like we can tonight, we want to extend a moment of silence. A moment for the people we have lost in Gaza, in the West Bank, Congo, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, and Israel. May we, in our work, art, and voices, one day build a loving world for future generations to never know this pain. And now, a moment of silence. And now, I will hand it back to our marketing and communications director, Dimitri Reyes, who will serve as our trusty MC for the evening and to introduce tonight's readers. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Tamara. It's super important that we acknowledge things that go on in the world, as folks that are writers, as folks that are doers, and as folks that record the landscape of the world, that record these stories. So as we venture into this evening, I know we'll all venture into this evening with respect for the stories that we are able to tell. We're going to start first with James Cruz, who is the editor of several best-selling books, including The Path to Kindness and How to Love the World, which has over 100,000 copies in print. He has been featured in the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, the New York Times Magazine, the New Republic, the Christian Science Monitor, and on NPR's Morning Edition. The author of 4 prize-winning books of poetry and of the book Kindness Will Save the World, James also speaks and leads workshops on kindness, mindfulness, and writing for self-compassion. He lives with his husband on 40 rocky acres in the woods of southern Vermont. For more info, visit jamescruz.net. And most recently, we are celebrating that he has won the New England Book Award for The Wonder of Small Things. Everyone, here is James Cruz.
Hello, everyone. Well, it's just such an honor and pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful to join Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, a dear friend, as well as Jack, who is also a dear friend, even if we haven't shared as much space together. His work, his poetry, his loving presence has been with me for many years now. So it's an honor to be here. I am a white male, middle-aged, I'm happy to say, with brown, graying hair, a little bit of a scruffy beard, and wearing a pea green button-down shirt. It's kind of fun to have to describe yourself, actually. And so I'll be reading from, Dimitri mentioned that we all have books that we're launching. They all happen to have pink covers. I don't know why. We did not plan this at all. And I didn't plan the pink little tabs either, but it just happened. So it's a very pink evening. And this book that I'm reading from is called Unlocking the Heart, Writing for Mindfulness, Courage, and Self-Compassion. And I put this book together in part because I get a lot of questions, how do I write for self-compassion? How do I use poetry in classrooms and, yoga retreats, meditation retreats, different courses that people teach? And so I have always thought of my poems as being open doors, and I try to write them in that way anyhow. And so this is called Unlocking the Heart because each of these poems in this book also carries with a reflection that talks about how I came to write the poem, some of the inspiration, and each one also has a writing prompt. And I've kind of organized them. I love to think of themes for poems and have them live beside each other. And so I've organized them into different groups. And so, there's a section on writing for self-compassion. There's a section on writing to heal from grief and different things like that. And so I want to start with this poem that was in part actually inspired by a mutual friend of ours, mine and Jack's, and Rosemerry too, also has interviewed him and knows him well, Mark Nepo, the spiritual writer, philosopher, and poet. And I was speaking with him and he said something like, to really see life clearly, we have to see, and I thought he was going to say something like, we have to see with our eyes wide open, something that we're used to hearing. But he said, we have to see with the eyes of the heart. And I thought, oh, what does it mean to see with the eyes of the heart? And so this poem came. This is The Eyes of the Heart. If you keep your eyes open, you will see the carpet of dandelions spread across the greening yard, and a grateful bee rolling in the petals of each one. You will see the pollen gathered in sacks on the back legs of a bumblebee, but you must keep the eyes of the heart open to feel the need that drives that hovering body from flower to flower. You must sense with a wise heart the wild desire of a dandelion's taproot to stay alive. Even with its leaves and blooms ripped away, still the root remains, clinging to soil as you hold fast to what feeds your heart too, refusing to let go, though others beg you, though they tug and tug. One of the things that I really love about Jack's poetry is that he doesn't shy away from the real and the true and the honest, even if that's a difficult honesty or difficult memory that he's sharing. And, there's a certain tenacity that is somehow paired with gentleness in his work that I find really admirable. And I think this is true of Rosemary's work too, which is, again, why it's such an honor to share space with you two tonight. And the next poem I want to share is called After the Fire. And it was really inspired by, I guess, the end of my mother's life. I lost her almost 2 years ago now and was a caregiver for her for many years. And this poem came to me as a gift that I would only understand and be able to open later. Um, so it was sort of a promise of something to come. So this is After the Fire. Let me endure whatever fires must pass through here, must scorch my skin. And if I have to feel the heat, let me also trust that, like the lodgepole pine, the fire will open the parts of me that are still closed tight, releasing seeds I've been clinging to, hoarding for years. Let me thrive in this new clearing, made at the center of my life, seeing now how the necessary flames melted away my resistance, revealing all that once lay hidden, asleep inside me. And of course, that's based on scientific fact that, the lodgepole pine does need the fire to pass through in order to release its seeds. But I always have to say, I would never invite the fire. I don't think any of us would invite the fire of difficulty, grief, depression, whatever we're facing and what many other people in the world are facing. And yet, I think that so often we see people who have this resilience that is very hard won, that the fire has brought out in them, whatever that personal fire might be. This next poem is a little bit more playful. I like to mix grief and joy, sorrow and delight. I feel like that's the truest piece of the human experience. So this is called One Word I Don't Need. And actually, I think this came to me when I was doing a reading with Naomi Shihab-Nye, and she said, I never use the word busy because I find that it makes me feel more hurried, the more I use the word busy. And I just thought, I really want to try that. And I am still learning and perfecting the art of not using the word busy, using a different word like full or, crowded or something like that. So this poem is my attempt to banish that word from my life too. This is called One Word I Don't Need. I am banishing the word busy from my mind, like picking stones from the lentils I have just washed in the colander. Is there an uglier word, busy, with its two hurried syllables and hard consonants rushing out of the mouth? Used mostly as an excuse not to be exactly where I am right now, which is leaning over the sink and letting lentils slide through my fingers, feeling their smoothness as I soften into the minutes. No longer seeing this as a task, but simply imagining what it will be like later to savor the lentils after they've simmered for hours with roasted tomatoes, cumin, and coconut milk. When we ladle them into waiting bowls and silence our phones, laying them both face down on the table. So no phones allowed at the dinner table in our house. um, I'm a big fan of pausing. I think it's one of the things that poetry really invites us to do. Take a deeper pause. It's really hard when you're reading a poem to just rush through it. Most of us here know that, and yet we probably catch ourselves still kind of pushing ahead, doing that thing. And I run a monthly writing community called the Monthly Pause. My weekly newsletter is called the Weekly Pause. So obviously, I'm a little obsessed with this word. And so that's why I loved this word when I came across it, which is Selah, shows up in the Psalms and the Bible. And we don't know exactly how to translate it. But a lot of folks think that it really just meant this slight pause before moving on to really let the words sink in, or let the music, oftentimes it was paired with music, to let the music sink in. And so this is called Selah. After black clouds swirled in the sky and rain made a lake of the driveway, the early evening turned so quiet I could hear suds dissolving in the sink from the sponge I'd just squeezed out. Bubbles popping, draining away, and I dropped so easily into myself like a rock sinking through clear water. The scribe writing the story of my life must have decided to insert the word Selah that appears over and over in the Psalms, and which we can only guess is an invitation to the reader to pause here in the text. Leave room between this breath and the next for the sound of that still small voice rising up inside you. I also want to take just a moment, if I can, to brag on my book because it has these little illustrations throughout, and there's some color throughout the book that I just am so thrilled by. It's really the little things that show another page here. That's one of the writing prompts there. And I think I'll just read another couple poems and then hand it off. This is a good one for all of us nowadays as the world seems to be speeding up. This is called After Burnout. You finally decide to do no more than is necessary, relishing each new gulp of air drawn into your lungs. When out of the flavorless mush of days, even weeks without sun, it happens again. Life calls you back with a hint of chocolate in the cup of coffee taken alone at the table, or in the needles of coneflower seeds sticking to your fingertips as you spread them around in the autumn earth. How all living things want to go on, attaching themselves to whatever body or breath of wind will carry them home. Now stop in the driveway and listen as amber gold leaves one by one break off with a simple snap of stem from branch, that sound just shy of silence, saying to you, it's time to release all this relentless reaching for the light. Rest is not death, though it may feel like it at first. And this is the last poem I'll share for this evening before handing it over. And I think it's always important to argue with the people that you admire most, both in life and on the page in your own poems. And so I wanted to argue with Mary Oliver in this poem, just a little bit, because she has this wonderful saying, part of a larger, beautiful poem. But she says, "Joy is not made to be a crumb." And I thought, boy, isn't that true? But isn't it also not true? So this is called Sunflower. Joy is not made to be a crumb, Mary Oliver once wrote. But isn't that how it often shows up at first? One crumb of attention, and another, until you're able to follow the trail leading to the volunteer sunflower you hadn't noticed, blooming by the garden. Volunteer, we say, meaning no human hand nestled that seed in the ground, though the same could be said of joy too, which seems to spring up out of nowhere when you see the face of that flower the French call tournesol, meaning turned toward the sun. And don't we each carry a small sun in our chests that tells us where to turn, where it's warm, where something bright has struggled up out of the earth and is now calling our name? Thank you so very much for being here tonight, for listening, and for showing up, especially for Jack Ridl's new book, which I have here all at once.
James, thank you so, so much. And I have to give credit where it's due. Was that last one memorized?
It was, yes. I wasn't sure if
Ooh.
I was going to be able to pull it off, but the words came. Thank you.
Beautiful. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And also everyone, if you really enjoy James's reading, Unlocking the Heart, Writing for Mindfulness, Courage, and Self-Compassion is available for 20% off if you use the coupon code UNLOCKING from Insight Editions, and we'll be sure to put that in the chat. James, thank you so much. I'm going to beam you out. We'll beam you back in for the Q&A. Much appreciated. Okay. And I also forgot to do my own visual description. So I am a Puerto Rican male of brown complexion. I have somewhat between a mullet and a bob haircut that is black, and it matches the hair on my chin as well as the shirt that I currently wear today. I also have brown and black glasses. Our next reader for us to get ready for is Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, who is a poet, teacher, speaker, and writing facilitator who co-hosts the Emerging Forum podcast on creative process. Her daily audio series, The Poetic Path, is on the Ritual app. Her poems have appeared on A Prairie Home Companion, PBS NewsHour, O Magazine, Carnegie Hall Stage, and River Rocks She Leaves Around Town. Her most recent poetry collections are All the Honey and The Unfolding. In January 2024, she became the first poet laureate for Evermore, helping others explore grief, bereavement, wonder, and love through poetry. She lives with her daughter and husband in Colorado. One word mantra is adjust. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Rosemerry.
Thank you. Thank you, Dimitri. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. That's a poem by Hafez, a version by Danny Ladinsky, and I wanted to start with it because I feel as if the poems I'm about to share are poems that maybe began in being frightened or hurting or struggling. And then the encouragement of light came. And I feel like all of the poems in this new collection, The Unfolding, are kind of that, poems that rose out of struggle and were met with light. I'm Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, and I am a middle-aged white woman. I have long, dark hair, and it's graying on the edges. And I'm wearing a pink shawl that I wore in honor of all of our pink book covers tonight. I smile a lot, and chances of me crying are, not so bad during the course of this. But if you could see me, you might notice that I'm trying not to cry. So then my chin does funny things when I'm trying not to cry. And I talk with my hands a lot, although I don't always notice that I'm doing it, but I've seen it happen in videos. So the hands will be moving around as I'm speaking too. So I'm delighted to be here with Jack, celebrating his new book. I've had the great pleasure to read it and get to write an endorsement for it. I love his new book. Well, honestly, I love all his books, but I also just love Jack. And so it's a joy to be here celebrating Jack. It's a joy to be here celebrating James and your new book, James. And this is the sweetness of I like to think of the communion of poets when we come together and play. I'm glad that already James has created this stage where we could be joyful and full of grief and bringing it all in, the full spectrum, and we'll just keep that up. So the unfolding is it just came out yesterday, and I guess we could say that I say in the introduction actually that it's written in the key of grief, which is to say that the poems are all written since 3 years ago, when my son Finn chose to take his life just before his 17th birthday. My father, Chuck Wahtola, died just a few months after that. So grief is woven through. It's kind of the base of the poems, but the melody of these poems is praise, is joy, is falling in love with the world. And so the whole book is actually structured around 4 words that I made up around praise. I realize that our language is a little bit lacking in how we speak about, well, paradox. And in this case, how it is that we might be going through a very difficult time and at the very same time find ways to engage more openly, more lovingly, more surprisingly with the beauty and wonder of the world. So I thought I'd read poems from each of those 4 sections in the book. I'll explain the word and I'll read a poem that kind of illustrates it. And the first word is Veruleia. It comes from veritas, the Latin, and alleluia. And to me, it's a word that means the praise that comes when we say yes to the world as it is, as opposed to the world the way we wish it would be. And I wanted to start with this poem, You Belong, because I've seen the names of so many beloveds in here. And it's a poem that really honors how we shape each other's lives and the way that we touch each other. If we could see the quilt of people on the screen tonight, which I think we'll have a chance to later, we'll notice how many of these people's lives perhaps have affected our own. Certainly, I noticed so many people who I could dedicate this poem to. So this poem is called You Belong. The way the grass belongs to the meadow, how without it the meadow would not be a meadow. This is the way you belong in my heart. Not that I made a space for you here. It's more that you helped make my heart what it is. And without you, my heart is not my heart. I cradle you here as in a nest of wheat, soft home, humble home, ever rewoven to fit the changing shape of you. It's not true our hearts are our own. They're symbiotic as meadows in spring. The heart exists for who grows in it. Who am I? Who am I? You, my sun, my grass, my wind. So there's a big thank you to all of the people who are here tonight, who are my sun, my grass, my wind, the other blades of grass in the meadow of me, and I appreciate you so much. I meant it when I said that these poems are written through the encouragement of light. See, here come the tears. It's no small thing to be loved when we most need love. Whether you do that by sending someone a card or by calling them on the phone or praying for them or whatever, you're bringing them food. There are so many ways to share love with each other, and especially in light of all of these things that were mentioned at the very opening of this reading, all the ways that the world is suffering. There is no act of love too small. Oh, it's always the love that gets me weeping. This is another poem from the very beginning of the book from Verulia, and it's called The Naked Heart Goes to Town. And if you also have been through a very difficult time, you know that sometimes it's very hard to go back into a community, even a community where you feel beloved. I live in a very small town in Southwest Colorado. Everybody knows everyone else. And that is a blessing, but it's also really hard to walk down the street. So this is The Naked Heart Goes to Town. The heart walks down the street with its big brim hat, its sunglasses, its four chambers stepping up onto the curb. It hopes it doesn't run into anyone it knows. It's hard enough to keep pumping 100,000 times a day. That is all the heart can manage right now. No conversation, no small talk, no big talk. The heart has nothing to say. A heart is made to feel, and feel it does as it makes its way to the post office. It stops at the crosswalk. It feels it all. It feels the cool breeze that buffets it. It feels the love for the scent of autumn. It feels love for the low glancing light, and it grieves for the loss of what it once pumped for. It grieves for the boy who still lives in its walls. It grieves for all who grieve, who weep. Oh, the heart. It feels so exposed as it stands at the door of the coffee shop and wonders if it can go in. The other hearts in the coffee shop wonder. The other hearts in the coffee shop seem to wear so much skin. The heart sniffs at the dark, bitter scent. It remembers what it was like to go inside, sip a coffee, talk about weather. It pounds against itself, walks on down the road. We can feel so naked when we're grieving, when we're struggling. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It does make it hard to go into a coffee shop. I just want to nod that this poem had coffee in it. And in that way, I felt like it was in conversation with Jack Ridl's poems, because I love how Jack brings coffee into his poems so much. But I do think that this nakedness that we experience when we're in a fragile, vulnerable, open-hearted state is a blessing. It isn't lost on me that many of the poems in the beginning of this book, Verulia, that chapter, focus on, skinny dipping and staying home alone in your underwear drinking. There's a Finnish word for that called sorikännit, or, so I think this kind of actual nakedness touches on the metaphorical nakedness of how do we show up vulnerable with each other. I think it's never been more important. And well, I'm willing to do it with you, friends. I decided some time ago that I wasn't going to not talk about the things I care about the most, even if they made me cry, because It's more important now than ever to talk about the ways we need and love each other. All right, but let's lighten it up with something a little bit silly. That is when I thought about this collection, at first I thought it might be a collection just about grief. And then I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds depressing. And it's not true, actually, to what it's like right now. I feel as if there's so much. There is grief, and there's also beauty, joy, connection, love. And so I wanted a book that really reflected that. Even silliness. And, I think about Jack, who inspired me with a poem long ago about even now knowing you're not going to be a circus clown, and kind of the playfulness of this. And this poem is maybe knowing that I'm never going to be a superhero, but if I were. This poem is in a chapter called Sarom, which is about meeting things that are difficult, as well as it's sorrow plus om. So the praise that comes when we meet what's difficult and open ourselves in that moment to what else is wonderful. So this is Word Woman joins the MCU. If you're not familiar, that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man, Ant-Man, all those. Word Woman joins the MCU. Well, long after the Avengers have obliterated Thanos, and Ant-Man has saved the quantum realm, and the vibranium is secured by Wakanda, and the Guardians of the Galaxy protect the universe again, the Russo brothers return to the silver screen with their newest hero, Word Woman, disguised as a middle-aged mother and wife. She wields a pen, a journal, a library of slender books. No one would ever suspect she could be a hero, least of all her. Heck, she can't even keep the rodents out of her garden, much less root the evil out of the world. Audiences yawn as they watch her sit at her kitchen counter in her slouchy sweater and wool slippers for hours. Where's the action? Someone shouts as he gets up for another bucket of popcorn. And that's when Stan Lee shows up as the UPS man, shocking everyone, and he delivers her a copy of Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. Cut to the next scene. She's in a black pleather bodysuit, wearing lots of mascara, a dark ponytail high on her head streaked with silver, and she is ripped and ready to do what it takes to make peace. Was that Neruda? Someone whispers in the front aisle as she slings poems one after another, stunning her enemies into silence. I think Amakai, someone says, or Shihab Nye. And when the movie's over, most people are grumbling that superheroes just are not what they used to be. But in the back, a young girl is scribbling words on a napkin. She is ready to save the world. This poem is in the next section called Communion, which I feel like is to sing, union, coming together. We're often asked to come together in ways that are difficult, ways maybe we would prefer even not to. And though I knew love before, not until my world dissolved in an instant did I begin to understand the communion of hearts. Not until I could not put 1 minute in front of the next did I begin to understand infinite devotion. Not until I lost my own flesh did I begin to understand the muscle of spirit. I will never understand the loss, never. I will never love the loss, never. But I love the life that rushes in after. I love the intimacy of those who have lost. How we find each other and offer our open embrace, our unwalled affection, our wildest wishes for peace. Not until I was consumed by the great wave of love did I know not to fear the great wave of love. Only then did I learn the beauty of ceding the self to something much greater. Only then did I learn how love not only carries us, it transforms who we are forever. And the final section is Pangloria, the ability to find praise in absolutely everything. And it's a poem I wrote at James's house So I wanted to read it for him, translation. Well, I want to read it for all of us. Translation. In a quiet house, a woman can have quiet thoughts, can sit in the quiet and let the quiet inside. In a quiet house, a woman can sit on the couch in a quiet room and watch the leaves out the window as they do not move in the wind that is not there. How quiet it is. The kind of deep quiet that makes a woman slip into the quiet as if it's inevitable. And the quiet seeps in and fills her the way water seeps quietly into sand. And the house is quiet. And the air is quiet. And the woods are quiet. And the world is quiet. And the woman is quiet until she rhymes with quiet, until she becomes the attention that meets the quiet, and the quiet becomes her. Thank you, friends.
Oh my goodness, Rosemary. That was a journey. Rosemary, the word woman. Now I'm starting to see it. I've been getting the emails from word woman, and now I'm seeing the secret identity. This is great. Oh, thank you so much, Rosemary. I'll be beaming you back in for the Q&A. Such a lovely reading. Such a lovely reading. Thank you. In the chat, I'm actually going to put the link for Rosemary's book, The Unfolding. You have so many fans in the chat, so if folks don't have it yet, they could pick it up from Wild House Publishing. Um, and now, wait, where is my reaction button? And now it is time for the one, the only, the illustrious, the dubious, the kindest man that I know, what we've all been waiting for, we've all been wanting to hear. Jack Ridl, who is the poet laureate of Douglas, Michigan, and is the author of St. Peter and the Goldfinch, Wayne State University Press 2019. His previous works have been awarded the National Gold Medal for Best Collection of Poetry by Forward Reviews and the Society of Midland Authors Best Book of Poetry Award for 2006. Losing Season, CavanKerry Press 2009, was named the Best Sports Book of the Year for 2009 by the Institute for International Sport. Then Poet Laureate Billy Collins selected Jack's Against Elegies. For the Center for Book Arts Chapbook Awards, students at Hope College named him both their outstanding professor and their favorite professor. And in 1996, the Carnegie Foundation named him Michigan Professor of the Year. More than 85 of Jack's students have earned their MFA degree, and more than 100 are published, several of whom have received First Book Awards and other national honors. Every Thursday, Jack posts on YouTube his vlog, The Sentimentalist. For further information about Jack, visit www.ridl.com. Everyone, please put your hands together for the one, the only, the enigmatic Jack Ridl.
Good night. What am I supposed to do? Oh, describe myself. I'm quite white, but from Czechoslovakia. Riddle should be spelled H-R-I-D. But great-grandpa had the H off. I'm bald on the top and curly on the sides. It used to be red. Now I don't know what it is. I have a white, scruffy beard. Brand new glasses. And yeah, I mean, look. Oh, I'm 80 years old. How's that? You know what? I have a couple of things. I wish I could hug everybody. And at 80, when you started writing poems, you wanted to be a poet. And at this point, I turned around and I look and I see, what if I hadn't written? And the two people that you were just now moved by, I'd never know. And Dimitri, Gabe, Tamara, and Dane. And all the other things, all you people out there I know wouldn't be in my life. So writing poems brought all of you to here. I can cry too, Rosemary. Trouble is, it doesn't show. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that I'm perpetually sad. And I just assume it. I wake up in the morning grieving. Yesterday's gone, so let's go into today. I'm so glad that those of you who might not be familiar with CavanKerry, I think you have a sense now of why it was my first, and it might be my only, although my ego might have gotten in the way, place to have this book published. I think you know, I don't have to repeat, just taking that time of quiet and the things that Tamara said. And all the things that CavanKerry does for others. Hospitals, mental centers, homeless. They give so much away. And I'm so grateful to be a part of that. And then I just wanted Rosemary and James to be with me tonight. I really wanted them to be. And to be part of their launch. They both write for the right reasons. And I don't want to be snotty, but an awful lot of people write for the wrong reason. Why in the hell would you try to be famous and be a poet? As Francis Ponget said, the French poet, when asked why he writes a poem, so everyone would leave me alone. Okay. I want to, of course, thank Gabe and Dimitri and Tamara and Dana and Joan. Boy, they're patient with me, kind to me. Feel like family. I'm old enough, they're my kids. There's an awful lot of students out there who gave me another life. They wouldn't be there if I hadn't chosen to do this. They wouldn't be in my heart. I might not even be here alive if it weren't for Julie. My wife has been there all along, and whenever I respond some way that seems inappropriate, I say, "Is that normal?" And she goes, "No, no," or "Yeah, yeah." She's never left my side. So thanks to everyone who has come into my world. I carry you, all of you. I'll read the title poem. Oh, the cover is a painting by our daughter Meredith, or as I've always called her since she was little Mimi. There's the cover. The painting hangs in our house. Boy, we are pink, aren't we? So I'm going to read the title poem all at once. That's how it happens. Always happens. It could be at a circus. Clowns all smiling beneath their paint. They could point their plastic guns at fire, filling the stands with popcorn. Maybe we would laugh like we used to, when no 18-year-old would thoughtfully consider firing round after round from a semi-automatic birthday present into the waiting stares from bodies unwillingly growing day by day into those same teen years. There alone stood Tigger, while Pooh, Piglet, Christopher Robin, and Eeyore lived on for another day. Those too young to understand were read to until sleep came again in the middle of a chapter. It's always too late to turn the page. There they all stood, taking shot after shot. Then they weren't home on time, where someone was making dinner, playing hearts or Uno, watching Wheel of Fortune. That morning, everyone woke with 2 days until summer break. 2 more school lunches. Maybe 3 or 4 more words to learn to spell. Maybe the last chapter of Little House. They were sure that in just 2 days, they would all walk out together, saying, "See you at the pool, at the playground, at your place. See you next year." I don't know how James and Rosemary do it without this. That's remarkable. The next poem comes from something that actually happened. Our daughter, Meredith, or as I call her, Mimi, was a toddler, and she toddled off down the street. Have you ever had, I'm sure you had those moments where the moon feels like it's sitting on the earth and it's enormous? Well, she started toddling down the street, and this poem comes from that. And I need to say that when I write, I don't need to say anything. My poems try to respond to their titles in some way. They're not instead of naming the poem, there's kind of a conversation with the title or response. Once it happens, the moon, full and rising at the end of the boulevard, sat enormous over the cross street, over the little park with its seesaw, slide, 3 swings, 2 weathered benches, and a sandbox. Our daughter, 2 years old, was toddling down the cracked and crooked sidewalk, arm outstretched, finger pointing. I'd allowed her to wobble ahead, but then the father in me realized she wasn't going to stop. Quiet as a prowler, I stiffened myself to break into her separate world, quickened my walk, and within my silence, a step or two behind, heard her chanting as if in prayer, "Touch moon, touch moon." Page 75. No, not page 75, page 60. Yeah, there we go. Here's James Cruz, Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. What a lucky guy, huh? There they are. They're also at the bedside. The title is The Night Before a Friend Had to Put Down Her Dog. I look across the living room. Our dog, Vivian, asleep, snoring, twitching on the sofa, her head resting on two pillows, she herself piled one on the other. Outside, another winter storm has laid its snow across the lawn, its wind-borne white having fallen through the woods behind our old house. Of course, it isn't our woods. And of course, neither is the house, nor Vivian now. We own nothing. Why, I wonder, can dogs be ever so good to us? Ever welcoming, everything, ever new. Even on the same old walk 4 times a day, I can just as well ask why the snow, the stars, why raspberries, and certainly why us. My wife endures my bewilderment as daily she spins wool into yarn. I, in wasteful wonder how can this possibly be? Her petal-preserved way of fleece to yarn and then to shawls, her gentle, quiet, numinous and nimble fingers, ignoring death at the door, always offering one more memory, waking the unwelcome ache. Death then turns, parting with, be back soon. I know I should stow the dishwasher, slide 3 Robert Johnson CDs into the player. It will soon come time to walk Vivian. She will sniff her way along her olfactory trail. I, as still commanded by my grandmother, will dress warmly. For now, Vivian sits, waits, nose pressed against the back door, calmly urging me to go into the accompaniment of cold. The snow, wind cast and swirling around us, my shoulders hunched, her nose plunging at me. Oh, she's a wonderful dog. She's a Spinone. Look up Spinone. She is peace incarnate. Just the sweetest, gentlest, most peaceful, patient dog. I thank Baron Wormser, who was the editor for this book, because he had the terrible task of having to cut something like 40 poems. Boy, he did a wonderful job. He just turned a whole bunch of poems into a collection. The title of this poem is How We Must Waken. Can you tell these poems are friends of Rosemary's and Jane's? They really like to be together. I think I'd like to see them all hang out. Yeah. How We Must Waken. I was at the back window watching our dog, my wife, and our daughter, the dog bounding into the wind-drifted snow as they, bundled and laughing, trudged their way to the front door. Jim Harrison reminds us it's better to live a sentimentalist than die a smartass. The ornaments are still on the tree. We're still playing Irish carols. It's a new year, but is there such a thing? Is there? The sun sets, rises, sets, and we name the days that tumble one into another, while 500 million light years away lies a galaxy with suns that have no days, no war, no need for a manger. Here we must waken, roll away the stone from our empty tomb of sleep, step through another sunlit tragic day, trying to believe in the snowplow, the mail, the hello from the next door neighbor, the mourning doves flock at the nearly empty feeder. Boy, it's such a hard time. Why did I watch half of that debate thing? What was that about? I might as well watch Abbott and Costello. Get out the vote, only make it for Kamala. No, Kamala. How can we live in a country where that guy's up for that? It's enough. I promise people here, none of that. You know, I've been because I was culted by a church youth minister. I ended up. The result of that was 20 years of mental illness, 5 psychiatric hospitals, and all because of that guy and the religious BS that he poisoned. I sort of lived the history of mental health because I had 13 shock treatments to start off the first time back in '63. And look at me at 80. Sane. Who's sane? But I've always been fascinated by Jesus and why did Jesus turn into Christianity? Everybody, are you a Christian? I taught at this school. It was had a Christian thread through it. One guy was going to apply for my position, and he said, but when they asked me, you know, do you believe Jesus saved you or something like that? I can't say yes. And I said, sure you can. Just say, if they say, do you believe that? Just say, wow, if he wants to do that, fine by me. Sure. And, but Jesus, what a one, that I was fascinated. Then I started thinking about the disciples, and that's what leads to this poem. I kept thinking, what would it be like to be a disciple? Are you kidding me? Jesus didn't found Christianity. He was Jesus. So here's one of the disciples, Bartholomew. The title of the poem's the name, Bartholomew, disciple. He would say, follow, and we would. One word, his word, and we were turned into fools, letting him take us all that way. Why we did to this day, I don't know. Look how it ended. Look what it became. What did we have to stay for? Nothing. There wasn't much to do. The poor were everywhere. We ate mostly bread and fish. We heard story after story, and, well, look it up. In the big deal painting, I'm rather glassy-eyed. And it wasn't the one. Miracles, they'd been going on before. But I will say it was his words. Words. Words had never done what his did. I'd listen. Later, I would try to make sense of them, and I never could. But I could feel them. Maybe that was it. How they got inside you, made you wonder and wrinkle. Reverse things. The first shall be last, the last first. Everything changed. I started looking at lepers and the poor and paid no attention anymore to the kings and scribes and Pharisees. I had thought the world of them. Now their importance felt unimportant. You started seeing everything with a new mind. You were drawn into a world spinning within a world, one drawing you in while the old one imposed itself on you. The reversals made me want to plant what hadn't belonged, lilies in wheat fields. You couldn't say, so what? Words really became flesh, and my flesh held a kingdom. Now most everything I believed didn't matter. Reason sure didn't matter. And money, and go make your list. Every single day we'd head off, follow, always wondering what we'd eat and where we'd sleep. Our feet were filthy. My God, we were always filthy. We stank. And then he'd point at birds, stalks of grain, even stop and have us kneel before a flower. And then he'd smile. That haunts me still, that smile. And then he died. They killed him. Love? He brought out their hate. He had a terrifying sense of mercy. Nothing he said or loved was impossible. Maybe that was it. It all seemed possible. And I'll finish by thanking everybody. Oh, goodness. And with this little poem, it's in here somewhere. It's at the end. And the titles. It's a conversation again. The title is All I Know Is It Was Dark. And we were walking in the snow, in the 4 feet of snow that each winter piles up along the east side of the house, the flakes having been blown off the lake, off the roofs, and into drifts higher than any stocking cap you had knitted and I had on. Remember? Maybe? We held hands. Well, actually, gloves. Well, I wore gloves. You had on mittens, ones you had knitted. When you knit, we rested on my grandmother's daybed. The one as a child I pretended was a bus I drove every day from the suburbs into the heart of downtown Pittsburgh after the gray smoke had metamorphosed white. I didn't know what the Renaissance city meant. I knew only that each day Mrs. Schnelker pulled the cord to be left off at 7th Avenue. Today you are knitting, and I am lying on the daybed, feet on your lap. I keep things clean where you comb a dry fleece. Then you pull the wool, set up your wheel, and spin. That night, when we trudged through the snowfall, glove around mitten, then mitten around glove, one of us lost our balance, but the other held on. Thank you so much.
Wow. Jack. Thank you so much for that. Um, I don't mean to use the religious speech, but it's just this evening has felt so much like being taken to church in different ways, you know? And there's something about the written word that reaches across screens in many ways. And this reading was so much more than just us communicating through words on a page, but just communicating as people. And I would actually make the argument to our executive director that the more people we actually have on these readings, the more a more cohesive conversation happens. So I'm super glad that I was able to get the three of you together. That blends so nicely, and I definitely need to send you all the chat because it's just been blowing up with fireworks of just emotion and appreciation and happiness. Gabe and Dana, if any questions come through the chat, because there's so many, please put them on that shared document that we have. I did catch one from Phyllis Klein. We are now entering the Q&A portion of our conversation. And Phyllis Klein wrote to the three of you, I always wonder about last lines in poems. Everyone crafts their endings differently. I'd love to hear the three of you talk about putting the cap on the pen and how you each approach your endings. And James, thank you for being with us. It's been a long hour, and thank you for starting. I would love to hear your voice, so I'd love you to jump in first.
You want me to start in on the discussion about endings too? I would love
What?
to. Well, it's funny actually. I think it happens differently each time. So there's never really a formula, but I too often pay attention to endings. And, as I was listening tonight, thinking like Jack and Rosemary, wow, like really bringing these poems home for us. I have a tendency to write beyond my endings. And so I often need to give the poem some time to sort of settle and then go back and lop off probably a good few 4 to 5 lines, if not more. Jack is nodding, so this may be familiar to him too. Or, I often share my poems with my husband. He's kind of my first enforced listener and reader. And he'll tell me, like, this is where the poem ends. This is the mic drop moment. And so I sometimes need that help. I think that I find that really helpful. And, I worked with Ted Kuzer for many years, and he often advocated for ending the poem on a really concrete physical note. And so I'm sometimes looking for those places where, um, there's some sort of concrete physical way that a poem can come to a close. And I was thinking of your poem, Rosemary, about, walking on along the road, bringing that poem to a close. Um, yeah, so some different options there.
That's beautiful, James. Yeah, the approach is always different. Thank you. Rosemary?
I think about this so much. And also, hi, Phyllis. So a couple of thoughts. When you said I write past the end, that's so funny because I feel like I do that same thing, but I mean the exact opposite as you. Like, I feel like if you know the ending, this is what I tell myself. If I know the ending, if I know where I'm going to end, then I've not given the poem the chance to teach me. Like I've written to the point of what I know. And I think that my joy in writing is to write past what I know into that moment of epiphany when I'm like, oh, that. So I feel like that usually happens when I write past the ending I think I know. Uh, so that I'll say that. But the other thing that I notice that I do, and I think it's a fun game, by the way, is to write the ending and then just chop it off and write another one and another one and another one and like 3 or 4 or 5. And I feel like the reason to do that is partly because there can be this pressure we put on ourselves to get it right, to nail the landing. And anytime I find that there's a pressure in writing, it that's the fastest obstacle to writing something that I care about, right? Like all of a sudden I'm trying to be good instead of really feeling into, living into, wondering into what's here, what's really here. So if I tell myself, okay, then write 5 endings, bing, 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 and now it becomes play. that lightens everything up. It might be that I like multiple endings best, but it also might be that there's one that shines. It's not always the first one I write. In fact, very seldom.
Yeah. The multiple endings would work really well for your Word Woman universe poems.
Right.
That Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, right? Like in a
Yeah,
parallel unit in the
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting because it's poignant to think that as artisans, when we're crafting something, we're trying to stick the landing on an epiphany. And we could do that to a point where it's almost counterproductive because then we're not feeling that epiphany ourselves. So that's so poignant in your response. Like it's done when you feel like your head has felt chopped off, not the reader,
Yeah.
to quote Dickinson. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Jack,
Oh,
so again, okay, you got it.
no, no, no.
I was just going to repeat the question, but you got it, Jack.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I was going to just be silly and say, yeah, I agree. Um, but the thing for me seems to be that the poem ends, but the something else starts. And I'm always hoping that the ending is the beginning of something for another. And as far as composing it, yeah, I invariably write past it or I don't get it. And so I love the writing three or four and seeing if they, hitch up and start something else. But the only thing I would add to what I agree with the James and Rosemary is um, that the poem, that's the end of the poem, but it's the beginning of something else for the person, for the other.
All right, great. Thanks. I think this one is going to go right into the other one pretty nicely because we were talking about endings, and in the chat, it seems like now we want to talk about beginnings or creating these poems. So I love how this is working. So Darlene said, I am a new writer and found out after I retired 4 years ago now. What suggestion do you have for a new writer for not getting burned out? I want to write and experience writing all the time, and I feel like all it will end if I just keep on going like this. So I guess it's the perpetuation of feeling like you're just going to get burnt out and you're in that kind of creative mode and you're a new writer where everything feels fresh and new. So what are the dangers of burnout? How do you don't get burnt out through this process of creating?
I'm going to dive right in because that was a
Yeah.
big thing with my working with students was I always told them that what's incredibly important to your writing is what your life is when you're not writing. And
Mm.
how does it, just look around. James and Rosemary's poems answered that question beautifully. Oh, cow. I mean, do you really? The attentiveness of both James and Rosemary is so remarkable. Um, I even told students carry a camera so you really see. You don't
Mm.
have to take any pictures. You just see it and use a window as a picture frame. Don't just look out the window, but see, learn. Most people don't see. Their eyes become pragmatic, so they won't run into something rather than look at the something they won't run into. And I mean, really look at it. I can't look at my grandmother's daybed without my grandmother. I can't.
Oh, yeah.
And without me driving the bus. I can't. I just can't.
Mm. I
Make
think we,
sure you're in the world.
yeah, Jack, I think we
Shut
sell
up.
ourselves short with our idea of experience, right? Like, no one is going to see through our own eyes. And unless if we actually tell that through that verse, no one is going to see it the way we're seeing it. So, that grandmother's bed without the attachment of the grandmother, if that story will go with you if you don't say it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you. Others?
All
How
right,
do
well, here we go. I think we do burn out, and I don't think that's so
Yeah.
bad. I
Mhm.
I don't, burning out is part of it, right? Just like being stuck is part of it. It's all part of it. It's all part of a writing practice. Um, and so today I'm burned out. I guess I just don't think it's such a problem. I will say, however, that I do think that there are things that we can do to create a sustainable practice. And I know that I often feel burned out, except that I promised myself, almost 20 years ago now, that I would write a poem every day. And I will. I will. I'm not going to not write a poem every day. That will happen. And no matter how burned out I feel, no matter how, not good the poem is, that's, my promise to myself was I will write something every day. So I do think there's something powerful about making a contract with ourselves. Contract, what a formal word. About making a promise to ourselves. There's something powerful about making a promise to ourselves. And what begins to happen for me, I'm 1,000% sure this is true for James and Jack too, but forgive me, fellers, for putting these words in your mouth. But the thing that happens when you have a consistent practice is it isn't so much about the poem, but it's about the way you end up meeting the rest of the world. I'm sure you noticed that Jack, James, I all wrote very daily poems about walking the dog, about what is it like when, when you're meeting grief, or when, like these very diurnal quotidian things that when we start to show up more and more with the page, we start to show up more and more with our life. If you have a practice of writing, then you'll keep writing. If you make it something sustainable and know that burnout is going to be part of it, you probably will burn out. And then you'll come back if you have a practice,
I'm interrupting James, but I just want to say, and it's an important thing to recognize that I'm 80. So if there's a book out by a guy who's 80, you're going to be okay, Doug. You're going to be okay.
Well, I love what's been said so far. I think so much wisdom. I would say also the way the question sounded to me is I'm afraid I'm going to burn out, not that I am
Mm.
burned out. And so you don't have a problem yet.
Mhm.
Like Rosemary said, you probably will burn out, maybe you will. But honestly, I think once you once you do make that promise and commitment to yourself, like I'm gonna show up to the page as regularly as possible, whatever that means to you, then you just do that and you put in your work and it becomes like the best job you've ever had. I do not burn out on writing. I burn out on answering emails
Mm.
and getting the tires put on the car and all the sort of stuff that can be beautiful, but is also just like, oh my gosh, this again. That's what I get burned out on. And so and the poetry teaches me how to appreciate that daily stuff as well. So, there's a circular quality to it. And I think if we can give, it sounded to me like Darlene was like that bumblebee I wrote about, rolling in the polleny, anthers and stamen and, like just enjoy it. Just enjoy it while you're in it. And then when you get burned out, you'll figure out what to do. It'll be okay.
That's great. I love that you went back to that, James, because like sitting here and thinking about how we are as artists, since we work with words, so much of what we are thinking of is just anticipating the next poem. And I think anticipating the next poem, we also anticipate the danger of not writing again, right? And I think poetry teaching us the day to day, and as Jack said, how to see, how to actually see. If you concentrate on that and just be continuous, being in perpetual in love with your work, I don't think you're gonna have to worry about that part of getting burnt out. Um, it's interesting too because Rosemary, you mentioned developing a practice, and I was hoping we would lead there. Jenna Kirkpatrick asked, for all of you, what are your best practices as a poet? And I'm assuming this could be interpretive to writing practice, ritualizing it. What is your best practice as a poet?
All right, my turn to go first.
Okay.
Reading poems. That's the best practice, reading so many poems. And by the way, hi, Jenna, and I know you read lots of poems, but I think not just reading them, but reading them almost selfishly, which is to say, what's, I don't know, this is going to be a little crass, sorry, but like what's in this for me? Like,
Mhm.
and just being so curious about where does the poem move you and then why? Oh, uh, that part, about how, whatever, to jump in that, why did that stick? And then I just let that be like, could I do that? Could I write a poem like that? Could I end a poem like that? Could I, just be so curious about what if I made the title, I don't know, any way that poem is working and get very curious about those inner machinations. And I feel like my best practice is just reading, 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 but reading with such wonder, with such curiosity, with such willingness to admire someone else's work and think, yes, yes, they really touched it there. How do I, can I give myself some kind of invitation to play in the same way?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just build on that and say that um, I agree with all of that. And I think one kind of larger practice that's been helpful to me is to try and weave poetry, writing, reading into just daily life as much as possible. So I have books spread all over the house, in the car. If I'm going somewhere, bring something in a bag. I bought these little notebooks that I just keep in every room so that if something comes, I can just sit down and write it. I've been writing more poems in the notes on my phone if I don't have a notebook with me, just stopping, and it looks like I'm texting. So you get a little bit of camouflage when you're out in the world, right? Like, oh, you're just texting like everyone else. No, I am not. I am writing a poem. So just kind of weaving it into daily life and really, there's the word again, pausing when something starts stirring in you and those words start coming. Just be like, okay, I am going to listen. I'm going to obey. And then it just becomes what you do. And less of this separate thing, like, oh, I have to go to my desk to do this work. It's just, no, this is just your life.
Yeah, certainly agree with those. And I'm trying to think of what to add. I sometimes I think part of the practice is catching yourself uh, trying to think of a subject instead of feeling, responding to something. And that you can get so, I'm trying to think of a subject. Well, I would take a guess that every poem you heard tonight didn't start with a subject. Was, it came about because of something, whatever that means. Because we're all, an interesting, I guess it's a paradox, is that we're all using words to create that for which there are no words. Um, and if we say, well, I think my subject's grief. Oh, good heavens. Then you better go, check out all the philosophy books instead of the poetry books. And that's a big mistake, I think some make. They get stuck trying to think of a subject. And and quick thing, I really is. The student came in. She said, "I can't think of anything to write." Oh my goodness, how many times did we hear that? And I said, well, "What about your grandmother?" And she said, "Well, everybody writes about." I said, "Oh my God, who's your grandmother?" I had no idea. And that's what happens. That's what stops. There's only one grandmother who had that daybed. What was a bus? That's the only one.
That's beautiful stuff, everyone. We're winding down right before we're going to get the moment of putting everyone else that's still in our Zoom to celebrate with a good night and a round of applause. Our last question is from Jimmy Papas. And on one hand, I believe in privacy, but I feel the need to know these personal stories. What are the poet's thoughts about this? Do you think it helps others to share them? So I think this is in the conversation of what Rosemary was talking about and mentioning the nakedness and that vulnerability. How do you all wager privacy versus needing to get those stories out about the grandmother, about the daybed, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think it is important to show up in an open, vulnerable way. If you're writing about other people that are still alive in your family, you might have to get a little permission. I know I wrote a book of essays that I had to get my husband's permission to share because they were very intimate. They were very much from our daily life. But I can't tell you how many people have appreciated that aspect of that book or the poems that I write. And I think it's important to share because it gives other people permission to do the same. That said, even though I'm guessing we would all feel like we know a great deal about each other, those of us who follow Jack and follow Rosemary,
Mm,
but I would guess, there are certain things that are off limits. And, I think we have to just have those boundaries for ourselves and decide, what those boundaries are personally and within our own families. So that's sort of a logistical answer, but I do think vulnerability is connection, simply put.
thank you, James.
That's beautiful. Vulnerability is connection. I think the privacy is of the respect, exactly what you said, James. Privacy is the other deserves privacy. And we, if Julie and I have a squabble, I'm not gonna, and your husband, Jay, what are we gonna write that, or are we gonna check with them first, or whatever? But mine, just as tonight, I'm just blurting out about being mentally ill. There's a reason. I'm going to say that 1,000 times until it's the same as the common cold. I am just want it out there. That's why I'm doing it. I want people to be able to say mental illness, same way they say I had the flu
Mm,
or I had COVID. Come on.
mm,
We have to be a community in all of those and comfort one another. And my hope is always that the vulnerability becomes a comfort to the other, that, oh my gosh, I was alone until I read James or Rosemary's poems.
mm.
And oh my gosh, they're out there. They're walking around. They're here. And they're with me. They're with me because they wrote it. That's how you're with. Our daughter said she was 7. She said, with's the most important word in the world because we're always with. We can't not be with.
All right, folks, we just got another one. Rosemary, we're going to go to you, but Darlene just said, I just took a very deep breath of relief, and now I plan to just enjoy this journey and stop worrying about what might come. Thank you, great writer Dimitri. We got another one. We got another one, everyone. We turned them over. Okay, Rosemary.
Well, I guess exactly what James said,
Mm,
exactly what Jack said. I think that there's a difference maybe between writing and sharing, and I'll just point that out that
Mhm.
I think that
mm,
it's essential in a way in our practice that we feel safe enough to explore whatever wants to come up. And let's be honest that writing is one of the most courageous things in the world that we can do,
yeah.
because things will come up that are very difficult to face, things that we really don't want to know ourselves, much less share with anyone else. And that can be terrifying or deeply unsettling. So to be able to write in a very safe space where we know that that's possible, I feel like that's the biggest gift that we can give to ourselves. You don't have to share those poems. Like to write a poem that touches the most difficult, most intimate thing and opens it up for us is it's huge. It's huge. But maybe it's not safe for whatever reason to share with the rest of the world. So don't, but maybe share it with the people who it is safe to share it with. And so maybe just really noticing the difference between a writing practice for ourselves that's about curiosity and wonder, and a writing practice that is, shared with the world, that's about creating community, and allowing that to be added into the mix of what James and Jack have already talked about.
Yeah. Oof. This was some reading, y'all, and some discussion. Thank you all so much. Everyone, I'm about to take everyone off of mute so you can give Jack and Rosemary and James your love and round of applause for this giving evening. You all gave so much to us, and I'm so appreciative for that. I'll take us also off of Spotlight so we're able to see everyone while we're turning everyone on to say our good nights. And Jack, Rosemary, James, congratulations. Seriously, congratulations on such
Yes.
wonderful
Thank
books.
you.